My name's Jon Hellin. I work with the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Centre, known by its Spanish acronym CIMMYT. And I'm involved in a research project funded by the CGIAR Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security Research Programme on index insurance, predominantly in sub-Saharan Africa, and very much in the context of index insurance bundled with climate-smart agricultural technologies. And this work's being carried out with partners at the International Research Institute for Climate and Society in Columbia University. And I want to present today a small case study linked to the wider issues of index insurance, but one where the emphasis is more on the importance of engaging at the policy planning level when we're looking at both the piloting and the scaling of index insurance. And I want to focus on work that we've been doing in Nigeria. Just a very brief outline of the presentation. First of all, an introduction where I want to emphasize the link between index insurance and climate smart agriculture. The photo on the right being one of those climate smart agricultural practices, technologies which are talked about a lot, in this case drought tolerant maize varieties, which CIMMYT, the organization I work for, has been developing with partners, and our interest is the extent to which index insurance can be bundled with some of these key technologies like drought tolerant maize, and there will be greater take up by farmers and enhanced climate change adaptation. This all links to what Jimmy and Shukri have mentioned around climate smart agriculture and one of the biggest threats to agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa being drought. I want to talk briefly about the roadmap that we've been following and developing with Nigerian colleagues, some of the principal challenges that we've faced, and then just some brief conclusions which fit in with some of those highlighted by the previous two speakers, Jimmy and Shukri. Climate change poses significant risks to agricultural development in many parts of the world, and this is also very much the case in Nigeria. And it was in 2014 that Nigeria's Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development proposed an expansion of agriculture insurance for its smallholder farmers as a means to increase the climate resilience of those farmers and enhance overall climate change adaptation in Nigeria. The Federal Ministry of Agriculture approached CCAFS, the research program on climate change, agriculture and food security, to work with it to design a roadmap. And this was largely based on CCAF's track record when it comes to the development with partners of climate smart agricultural technologies and practices, and its experiences around index insurance. On the right is a picture, for example, of a publication that CCAF's brought out a couple of years ago, specifically on the challenges of scaling up index insurance for smallholder farmers. And this draws on a number of case studies that CCAF's has been involved in several countries, including Senegal, Ethiopia, and Kenya. And this, I think, provided the raison d'etre, the main reason why the Nigerian government turned to CCAF's as a key colleague, key partner to develop this roadmap for insurance in Nigeria. The first thing that CCAFS did was organise an initial knowledge sharing workshop in January 2015. And this brought together quite diverse actors from the public and private sectors involved in index insurance. And this is something that Jimmy referred to in his talk, the need to bring together public actors, private sector actors, the donors. And this is what we did in London. We also brought representatives from the Indian insurance industry, where index insurance has taken off and is now covering millions and millions of farmers, as a means to enhance South-South collaboration and understanding, looking at how the Nigeria experience can contribute to what we were planning to do, hoping to do in Nigeria. And We brought together people from the insurance industry, the reinsurance industry, the Meteorological Society in Nigeria, and also the insurance industry. And these were people who came with a lot of experience of their work in different index insurance initiatives, the aforementioned ones in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Senegal, but of course the India. And that laid the foundations for a group of working partners to strategize and to come up with a document that would enable the Nigerian government to implement a large index insurance scheme. And of course, that's not the end of the story. Bringing together partners, getting communication channels open, it was the beginning of a process. And we had a follow-up meeting in May 2015 in Zurich, hosted by one of the big reinsurers, Swiss Re. And again, this brought together some of the same actors as in London, but also additional ones to flesh out much of what we've been talking about in London and getting a clear idea of the content of a roadmap document that the Nigerian government wanted in order to bring about these key policy changes and the implementation of that policy in Nigeria. And a lot of effort has gone into maintaining the communication between these actors that don't necessarily talk to each other that much. My experience has certainly been that the insurance industry can talk a lot about index insurance, and we agriculture researchers can do a lot of work around index insurance and farmers and the bottlenecks to the uptake of climate smart agriculture, but it's not often that we're actually really talking together, and that's what we've continued to do. There was important further interaction with Nigerian government officials during the COP22 climate change talks, which took place in Marrakesh. And then that has led recently to an official invitation from the Nigerian government to CCAFs to present the roadmap document, which we've now written, and to explore immediate ways of implementing index insurance projects within Africa, within Nigeria. And that is the next step. We're looking at meeting in Abuja with the ministry, an official launch of the roadmap document, and another step in bringing together some of these key players who have been involved in the process since the initial meeting in January. The process has certainly come across challenges. The main one has just been bringing together these different actors and a recognition that often we portray the situation as one being that, but we don't really speak the same language. Those in the insurance industry focus on issues around insurance and they have their own sort of language and perspectives, and we working in agricultural research talk another way, and then the input suppliers, the seed companies, have their own perspectives. And sometimes I've come across people almost referring to a Tower of Babel situation, a lack of communication because we're all talking different languages. And what we've found, on the contrary, is bringing people together has actually made us realize that it's not a Tower of Babel. We actually talk the same language, we just haven't been talking together enough. And I think that's been one of the key insights of the Nigeria work. There are still the challenges which the other two speakers, Jimmy and Shukri, have referred to, that in order to reduce basis risk, something that Shukri explained in detail, we do need a lot more meteorological data. We've also had the challenge in Nigeria of a change of government and subsequent change of personnel working in the key ministries that we're engaged with, and that's had to re-engage. We've had to re-engage with some new officials. There's a lack of an insurance culture and a need for regulatory environments in Nigeria, and also always the challenge of how you engage with farming communities and build their capacity to understand and demand insurance products which are a bit more complicated than your bog standard indemnity ones. The conclusions we've reached are that input is required. in terms of building these public and private sector alliances. It shouldn't be underestimated how much is needed and the importance of starting this process from the word go. Pilots are needed, but of course we have to address the challenge of scaling, challenges which Shukri has highlighted. But what we see from around the world and what we see with the desire of the Nigerian government to build the resilience, climate resilience of Nigeria is a real opportunity to bundle index insurance with key climate smart agricultural technologies and practices, as in this picture, climate adapted maize varieties, the ones that the organisation I work for, CIMMYT, and partners have been developing in Africa. And we also have to put everything into a wider perspective. Index insurance is not a panacea. It's not an end in itself. It's a means to contributing to climate change adaptation. And as part of the work with farming communities, we also have to look at issues around post-harvest storage and market access. There are farmers who will say there's little point in investing more in farm productivity and growing more if I'm going to lose 10 to 20% of my harvest as a result of post-harvest losses, or I haven't got anywhere to sell my products. And that's been one of the key messages coming out of the Nigeria work, and real opportunities to work further to ensure that index insurance moves beyond the pilot stage to the scaling. And my email address appears on the screen, and also background information on the CIMMYT